enabling the digital economy.
Good morning. Let's try that again. Good morning. That's good. Since we're only a small crowd, how about we come forward? We'll have an informal chat rather than a formal presentation to that. So if you want to just come forward, I'd appreciate it. Please. No? You'd rather sit at the back? Come. It'll be nicer. Thank you. OK. Open source leadership. What is open source? Everybody knows what open source is. But to start with what open source leadership is, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what the open source era is, which is the current times in which we live. So the open source era has two aspects to it. One aspect looks like this, which is no surprise to anyone. It is called Uber connected. Everything and everyone is connected. No surprises there. But what this connectivity does, it does amazing things to our lives. So knowledge and information now is Google, taxis Ubered, communication WhatsApped, even life and relationships are Facebooked. I will never understand why two people who are in love with each other wake up on the same bed in the morning, and if it's the other person's birthday, the normal thing to do would be to give them a hug and a kiss and say, "Happy birthday, darling," isn't it? But these days, we reach out for our phone first and go on Facebook and say, "Happy birthday to the best girlfriend in the world. I wish I wouldn't exist without you. I love you so much, blah, blah, blah. Happy birthday," post. Oh, by the way, happy birthday, darling, is the second thought, right? That's kind of how life has become these days. Work, of course, has been Bangaloring for about 25 years now. Nothing new there. But the interesting thing about the open source era is this, that thanks to the gig economy, there is a clear shift from full-time employment to free agency. By some estimates, about 40% of the US workforce is already a free agent. I come from a small little country in Asia called Malaysia, and I was surprised to hear the number in Malaysia, of all places, it's 33%. So it's not just a Silicon Valley phenomena. This is here and now everywhere. Full-time employment is not something that, very soon the numbers are going to be 50%, is what I've been told. Another way of looking at the open source era is this. Combined market cap of three of the biggest auto companies in 1990 in Detroit was $36 billion, revenue between them of $250 billion, and they employed 1.2 billion people to produce that revenue. Well, fast forward to the open source era, and the combined three companies in Silicon Valley, over $2 trillion, and this is already outdated because this is last year, $365 billion in revenue between them, but they do it with about 1/10 of the employee base. Welcome to the open source era. Klaus Schwab has a nice way of putting it. He says that the reason why we can do so much more with so much less is because marginal cost of digital business tends to be towards zero. Now, we can understand if you produce software and the marginal cost of software tends towards zero, but soon, even hard goods production, marginal cost will tend towards zero. Example, you want to buy a pair of shoes today. You have two options, pretty much. You go to the mall, try out a few pairs, pay with cash or credit, bring a box home. The other option, you go online, you know exactly the shoe you want, you order, pay with credit card or whatever payment method, and a few days later, a box arrives, right? Soon there'll be a third option. You will go online, not to buy your shoe, not to order your shoe, but to design your shoe. You will say, I want pink laces on the right side, I want green laces on the left, I want extra padding under my right heel because my right heel hurts when I walk, blah, 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 and you will click, and you will not pay and wait for a box to arrive a few weeks later. Actually, a little while later, maybe a few days later, an email link will arrive in your inbox. You will click on that link, and your shoe will print on your 3D printer at home. So even marginal cost of hard goods production will start tending towards zero. That's what connectivity is doing. Nothing I've told you is new, but just putting it in perspective. The other aspect of the open source era is this. It's made of people, and it's called Uber populated. We are going to 10 billion people by 2060. And this creates exciting opportunities because most of these people are going to be born in Asia. So obviously, they call it the Asian century of exciting opportunities. Let's look at some of those very quickly. Poultry consumption, for example. America consumes, with 300 million people, consumes 9 billion birds a year. Asia, with 13 times the people, consumes only 16 billion birds. You can see the opportunity for poultry companies. Same is the case with energy consumption, but here's my favorite. Let me ask you, how many, between every 1,000 Americans, how many cars do you think they own? So per 1,000 Americans, what is the number of car ownership? Any guesses, anyone? 500? 1,500? Any others? 2,000? Well, it's 800. It's still the highest number in the world if you take it across the entire population. Yeah, it's still the highest number in the world. What do you think that number is in China? Any idea? 100. It's 200. And what do you think the number is in India? It's 50. So look at how auto companies are salivating looking at the Asian century. And here's another one of my favorites. India's luxury goods market is seen as 350 million consumers, more than the entire population of the United States. India is a strange country. It is at the same time the richest and the poorest country in the world. Actually, somebody else took over India as the poorest country in the world just a few months ago, but until recently, the number of people living below $2 a day, highest number was in India. So it was the richest and the poorest country at the same time, right? So everybody's talking about the exciting Asian century, but nobody's talking about the daunting, or rather fewer people are talking about the daunting challenges of the Asian century. Here are some of them. 6 out of the 7.5 billion of us have mobile phones, but only 4.5 billion have access to a working toilet. Where are most of these toiletless people? Also in Asia. Hundreds of millions of people do not have access to clean drinking water. And I'm told that 1 in 2 hospital beds anywhere in the world is occupied because of a waterborne disease. And so on and so forth, without thinking about things in a different way, without thinking about leadership in a different way, the exciting opportunities are going to be anything but that. So welcome to the open source 21st century. Connectivity of people and things is obliterating business models before you can say Jack Robinson. Breakneck speed and total transparency, the death of privacy. There is nothing private anymore. And there are 2 things I want to point out which pertain to what I'm going to say next, which is ordinary people today are more empowered than ever before in human history. Why? Because we all have a weapon of mass destruction right in our pockets. With this, we can cause serious destruction whenever we want, right? This little thing has more computing power than a supercomputer the size of this room from 20 years ago. And leaders, on the other hand, actually everybody is, but leaders even more so, are particularly exposed, and exposed to the point of being naked. Everything they say, everything. Roll your memory back to the last presidential election season in the United States, and you know what naked means, right? That's how these times that we live in look like. And the question is, how do you lead in the open source century? How do you create more innovation and breakthrough success in times like this? And how do you deal with your day-to-day employees if you manage full-time or even free agent employee population? Let's start with leadership. Now, the first thing we need to do with leadership is to understand that all the notions about leadership that have stood their ground for over 50 to 100 years have to go. We have confused followership with leadership since as long as I can remember. How many of you have children? How many of us are parents? Right. Don't we love our children when they listen to us and obey? And don't we kind of discipline them, and in Asia kind of even whack them when they don't listen, when they are too rebellious? So right when they are little, kids understand that there is an authority figure called parents, and if I want to be rewarded, I better do exactly what I'm told. Followership confused for leadership. Now the kid goes to school. Who is the teacher's pet in class? The most favorite student of the teacher in any class, anywhere in the world. The most obedient one, isn't it? And the most obedient one is usually made the monitor or prefect of the class. Again, followership rewarded for leadership. Well, now I'm in the boardroom and I'm a CEO, and I feel like I have all the power in the world to make a difference. I can do whatever I want. I go to my board and I make a fancy presentation, well-researched, saying our strategy is outdated, the world is changing, we need to go in a different direction. Board, please approve this new business plan. What's the first question the board asks? Anyone? At the end of this presentation, what's the first question the board will usually ask? Let me hear it. Take a guess. What's in it for us is the second question. What's the first question? That's the third question. What's the first question? The first question usually is, have 10 companies already proven this new business model? Is it a confirmed best practice? If it is a confirmed best practice, you may follow the best practice. Follow best practice. So right from home, throughout school and college, all the way to the boardroom, we reward followership with as leadership, and that's got to go. I won't go through this entire list, but one more. We have been confusing position power for leadership. The moment somebody wins an election, we call them the leader of the country. The moment somebody is appointed as CEO, we call them the leader of the company. But is position and title the same thing as leadership? Of course not. My first book I ever wrote was called Too Many Bosses, Too Few Leaders, for exactly that reason. The point is, none of this is leadership. We need to look at a different way if we are going to survive in today's day and age in the open source era. So to understand leadership in the open source era, let me show you quickly the CV of the resume of a modern day leader. You'll probably start recognizing him pretty quickly. In 1999, he launched Napster. How many people remember Napster? Yeah, so you know who he is already, right? It was obviously illegal. It was shut down by court order. In 2002, he's a hacker, basically. He first hacked into our music files. Now he's hacked into our contact management system, and that didn't work either. But he made his first money in 2004 or 5 when he created the first user interface of Facebook. Now he's hacked into our personal lives. 2010, he was one of the earliest investors in Spotify, trying to legalize what he was trying to do with Napster, perhaps. And then in 2014, he tried, the key word is tried, creating a social network for politics, helping voters in the United States exercise their right judiciously. 2016, he hacks into our living rooms, and he creates a set-top box. If you want to watch a new film, first day, first show, and you're willing to pay $50, you can do that legally. And finally, he launched something called PICE, which is hacking into the secretive world of cancer. He is now forcing 6 of the top cancer research institutes to poll in their research and share their research at different stages, right? So that cancer cure and drugs can come to market cheaper, better, and faster. What happens is scientists who are researching cancer don't like to share their research at various stages because they want to be the ones who come to the final point by themselves. But imagine if scientists shared their research. That's exactly what he's trying to do. Now, by no means is this guy perfect. He even spent a few nights in jail when he was young doing some stupid things. But he evolved into a leader. And this is what he's doing now. He's still on the right side of 40. Now, whether it is Sean Parker or any of these people, by the way, the reason you see a ring around the face of Travis Kalanick is when we did this research 3 years ago, the people who went into our research, we thought they were great leaders, but since then things turned out otherwise. That's the reason you'll see rings around some of the faces in my presentation. But whether it was Sean Parker or any of these people, what were they trying to do? What are they trying to do? Are they just trying to make money? Or is there more to it? There's clearly more to it, isn't it? Would it be fair to say that they are trying to create a tomorrow that is better for them and for people around them? A tomorrow that is better than today and better than yesterday? That is the definition of leadership we need in the open source era, because you have exciting opportunities and daunting challenges. Leadership cannot be about climbing the corporate ladder. Leadership cannot be about commanding people with your influence, with your title, to tell them what to do. Leadership is a burning desire. It ought to be a burning desire to create a better future. You have to seriously feel inside your gut that burning desire to create a better future, because the planet needs it. The next generation needs it. if we don't change the definition of leadership, we are going to be doomed. The problem lies with the English dictionary. You pick up any English language dictionary and you look up the word leader and you look up the word boss. Guess what you will find? Almost identical descriptions. So the dictionary does not differentiate between a boss and a leader, and that is the problem. In today's age with daunting challenges, and whether you want to solve the daunting challenges or exploit the exciting opportunities that the open source era gives us, either which way, it has to be a burning desire to create a better future. Now, I've spent nearly 20 minutes, 17 minutes, selling you a philosophy for life. But I'm going to say something strange. Believe what you see on the screen at your own risk. Now, why would I do that? Make the case that this ought to be the definition, and then say, believe it at your own risk. What happens when you tell people around you, come with me, let's create a better future? Come with me, let's create change. What do you get from people when you say, come with me, let's create change? What do you get? What do you hear? Sorry? Followers? Not initially. Resistance. Exactly. You get all kinds of resistance. Active resistance, passive resistance, all kinds of resistance. First, they'll give you friendly advice. Oh, don't try that. Don't ruin your career. Take my advice. Don't do it. If you don't listen to that so-called friendly advice and you get started, you get nothing but resistance. So let's get one thing straight. If you believe what is on the screen, your constant companion from that point onwards is going to be serious resistance. So what do you need in order to not give up? Because the difference between a leader and a non-leader is this. Non-leaders give up in the face of resistance. Right? So what do you need? You need perseverance, you need passion, you get belief, faith, and all kinds of responses when I ask the question, if I have more time. But the word I'd like to use, if I could take editorial license and combine all those words into one word, is energy. You need a very special kind of energy, deep, intrinsic, almost a spiritual kind of energy, not religious, that is needed in order to not give up. I call it 27-year energy. You know, in the United States, I'm very fond of this drink called 5-hour energy. So you're driving interstate, you get tired, you pull into the rest area, you drink this little thing up, lots of sugar, lots of caffeine, and it wakes you up and you can drive a couple more hours. And I joke there that, we're not looking for a 5-hour energy, we're looking for 27-year energy. Why 27-year energy? That's the amount of time Nelson Mandela spent in jail and still not give up on his dream of creating a rainbow nation. How do you get that kind of energy? So first, let's complete the definition. Leadership ought to be the art, not science, of harnessing human energy towards the creation of a better future. You first have to harness your own energy, find that 27-year energy in yourself, and then find a way to do that for your company or the organization that you lead. Very quickly, before I move on to things like innovation, how do you find that long-lasting energy in yourself? The good news is everybody in this room has it. The bad news is very few of us will bring it out. Okay? But what are those sources? I've done nothing but study leadership for 25 years of my life, and here's what I've learned. Great leaders, all great leaders have gone through this process that we like to call inner engineering. I steal the term from somebody that I have a lot of respect for. To use it in the same, inner engineering work needs to happen. See, what happens in most leadership training is it's all on-the-surface skills, emotional intelligence, conflict management, this, that, and the other. But for leadership energy, you have to go inside. And there are two sources, three actually, but two primary sources of long-lasting leadership energy. The first is being super clear and deeply convicted in a set of values that you will never compromise no matter what happens. And the key words are, you will never compromise no matter what happens. When Nelson Mandela became president, the majority population wanted revenge. They wanted an eye for an eye. He offered reconciliation. He offered forgiveness. He went against the very people that elected him. And then his wife and daughter left him. They thought that he had done a deal with the devil. How can you sell your soul? Have you forgotten what they did to us? But he still did not give up his values of forgiveness and reconciliation. And he consoled himself by saying, my family is not 2 people, my family is 44 million people. So that's what I mean. You have to believe in a set of values that you will never compromise no matter what happens. That's the first pillar of great leadership and long-lasting leadership energy. Why? Because whenever you are in a crisis, you ask yourself the question, if I acted according to my values, what would I do? 99.9% of the times, the answer will become clear. The problem is not that we don't know how to solve problems. The problem is we don't know with full clarity what our values are. Okay? Now, as you start looking at life from the lens of such values clarity, you start recognizing your energy. Because energy happens, or energy churns in your body at the intersection of your values and whatever it is that you're experiencing. Meaning, if you are in a situation that is against your deeply held values, you will feel anger. You will feel sadness. That's negative energy. If you are in a situation that is in accordance with your values, you will feel happiness. You will feel excitement, which is positive energy. So you will recognize your energy at the intersection of your values and day-to-day life. Unless you are clear about your values, you will not begin to recognize your energy. And unless you can recognize your energy, you cannot channel it towards fearless purpose. Because you have to see what are the things that give me energy, that churn energy within me, and which one of those can I convert into fearless purpose. If your purpose is based on your values, you will lose fear. If you lose fear, you don't give up. If you don't give up, you can never fail. That is the inner engineering work of personal leadership that almost never happens, which is why great leadership is so rare in the world. It's not rocket science. You have to reflect and be honest. I call it emotional integrity, not emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is an on-the-surface skill. Emotional integrity is the courage to look in the mirror and accept and admit at least to yourself what you really want for yourself without using the societal lens. That's emotional integrity. So emotional integrity must come before emotional intelligence. If you're not honest with yourself, then how can you find your leadership energy? How can you find 27-year energy? We are very good as human beings in deluding ourselves. We are very good at being dishonest with ourselves. So that's a little bit about personal leadership energy. This is what we need in the open source era. And then even the organizations that we lead must be built on organizational purpose and organizational values. In the open source era, as we saw from a lot of sessions over the last 2 days, total transparency. The market and customers and consumers will only reward organizations that are totally clean and stand for a values-based purpose. Gone are the days when you can hide bad practice under opaque systems. Those days are over. Look at what's happening with the recent killing of the journalist in Turkey. Within how many days we know gory details, audios, videos, and everything is out. That's how naked everybody is today. So only those organizations that build themselves on a values-based purpose and are totally transparent about it and stand for what is right are going to survive in the open source era. I say that the only silver lining of the dark cloud, of the otherwise dark cloud of the death of privacy, might be this. It might be making society more honest. So the job of senior leadership in any organization should be to maximize the sweet spot of leadership energy, where the individual energy of the employees and the organizational energy, both of which are based on values and purpose, is maximized. That should be the sole purpose of senior management in the open source era. So that is a little bit about leadership. Let's talk about innovation and how to create breakthrough success now, and we'll stick with leadership just a little bit longer. Here's the issue. How do you create innovation again and again? How do you create breakthrough success for your organization again and again? You pick up any literature on leadership online or in bookstores, and it will tell you that inclusive or democratic leadership is the way to go. You want to go fast, you want to go fast, you can go yourself. You want to go far, take people with you. That's the phrase that's used. And yet, so every piece of literature says inclusive leadership it is. And yet you see people like Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, who did the exact opposite. and change the history or rock the history of the world by doing the exact opposite. So which one is true? All the literature or these examples? Well, we decided to ask 17,000 people in 28 countries those very questions. We gave them profiles of some great leaders and said, what do they have in common? So we showed them a bunch of leaders and said, what do they have in common? And we asked them to choose from a list of behaviors and give us the top 3 commonalities. The pink ones are all-inclusive democratic leadership behaviors, and the blue ones are my way or the highway kind of behaviors. And we said, pick the top 3 commonalities. Guess which ones came out at top? The blue ones or the pink ones? The blue ones, exactly. All 5 of the top were blue ones. Whoa. My colleagues at the center said, is this the message we want to give to the world, that be autocratic? Do I now have license to kill 007? If somebody doesn't agree with me, just shoot? Not so fast. We said, let's double check. So we asked another question. What do business leaders today need to do in order to drive unprecedented success? By the way, all of this data, all the detail behind this is in the book. So if you want to pick one up, which Peter has very kindly made available to you, feel free. A lot of detail behind it. You can read it all. And again, we got the same results. All the blues on the top. Well, let's try one last time. Is a significant amount of bold, top-down autocratic leadership required in today's day and age? Because, today, consensus is not even possible. Anybody can join any debate, thanks to this, because of connectivity, right? So how do you even drive consensus? When Google fired the James Damore, the engineer, last year, public opinion is still 50-50 split on that issue. Half the people in the world think that he was fired wrongly. The other half think that he was fired rightly. And the case is still in court. Consensus may not even be possible. So is it required? And again, 75% of our global database said agree or strongly agree. So we asked the same kind of question 3 times, and we got the same results. Now look at this. This is the green bars are people in each country that agree or strongly agree that bold, top-down autocratic leadership is required. Without exception, the whole world agrees. Surprising? It is what it is. But this is what leads to what we call the 21st century leadership dilemma. On the one hand, the data says you need to be autocratic, right? On the other hand, we live in an era of breakneck speed, total transparency, where ordinary people are more empowered than ever before and leaders totally exposed and naked. The 21st century leadership dilemma is, how can anyone be autocratic in this environment? Why would people even let you be autocratic, right? So what do I do with this data? We have people power. Now think of the Arab Spring, right? And that tells you people power. How can anyone be autocratic? That is the #1 leadership dilemma of the 21st century, and we somehow need to solve it. And as you read the book, you will get a lot of detail about it, but we believe we have to practice a form of autocracy called positive autocracy. And there are 5 keys. The first one is you have to earn the right to be autocratic. You have to literally beg permission from the people that you lead so that they allow you to be autocratic. And how do you do that? You build a genuine reputation as a better future creator. How do you do that? You live a values-based purpose and never, ever move away from that. The people of Singapore allowed Lee Kuan Yew to be autocratic because they genuinely believe he will take us to a better future, so they gave him permission to be autocratic. If I don't have to chew gum in return for my country becoming one of the highest per capita incomes in the world, I won't chew gum because Lee Kuan Yew says so. That's fine. You earn the right. Second, you have to master the dance of the naked autocrat. Why naked autocrat? Because we are naked and we need to be autocratic according to the data, so naked autocrat. By the way, I wanted to call this book The Naked Autocrat, but my publishers absolutely said no way, and they called it something as boring as open source leadership, but anyway, that's a different story. What is the dance of the naked autocrat? On the one hand, please remain autocratic about your values and purpose because you've thought through your values, you've thought through your purpose slowly, deliberately, carefully. You didn't do that in half an hour exercise. Now that you have convinced yourself that these are the right values and this is the right purpose, stay autocratic about it, because otherwise you will never achieve anything. Because naysayers, there is no shortage of them around the world. And leaders find themselves alone all the time because you've seen a picture of a better future that the rest of the world hasn't seen, which is your purpose. Don't let people rain on that parade. At the same time, you need to be compassionate and humble and respectful with people. Dance of the Naked Autocrat, two seemingly opposite things, but you got to get good at doing both at the same time. And yes, it is possible. And Lee Kuan Yew, again, was a master of that. He said, if there was a reason why it is a no, it must remain a no, but the man must be told politely. You lose nothing by being polite. The Dance of the Naked Autocrat. Third, give people freedom within a framework. You know, every organization has a set of values in the hallways and on their websites. And they also have policies, procedures, and rules. And the larger the organization gets, more rules, more policies, more procedures. Before you know it, your culture is a bureaucracy, a red ocean of bureaucracy of rules, policies, procedures, in which it is difficult to even breathe. And then we say we want our employees to think and act like owners. Well, you've put them in this red box. How can they be owners? Because they're not even allowed to think. They're in boxes upon boxes upon boxes. In the open source era, which is undermined by breakneck speed, this cannot go on. There is a reason why only 12% of the Fortune 500 companies that were in the original list still exist. This. Instead, we need to create a culture based on values rather than rules. Quick example. You know, last year, the United Airlines video went viral of these people beating up Dr. Dow and pulling him out in a bloodied state. You know what the first words from the CEO's office were when that video went viral? Anybody knows? No, not. I wish it was, oh shit. It wasn't. The first words were, my employees did nothing wrong. They followed stated company procedure. And I want to ask, what a PR disaster if there was one, right? Even if it was true. Why would you say so? But anyway, I want to ask that CEO, what if instead of following stated company procedure, your employees had followed stated company values? Would they still have done what they've done? Point is, we need to build a culture based on rules, on values, not rules. And I'll come back to that a little bit later to talk some more. And finally, not finally, number 4 is listen, learn, and reflect continuously. Even though I am telling you to be autocratic about your values and your purpose, you still have to keep your eyes and ears open. If and only if you get very compelling information, be prepared to change those, but not easily. Again, a very delicate balance. And finally, forgive more often. If you want innovation, you need to build a culture of forgiveness and compassion. I work with a lot of clients around the world who very proudly tell me, we are a zero-tolerance culture for mistakes. I say, well, then also know that you are 100% intolerant for innovation. Because there will be no innovation if there is no forgiveness. And if you really want to meet, as Satya Nadella of Microsoft says, meeting the known needs of your customers is not innovation. That's playing catch-up. It is meeting the unmet and unarticulated needs of customers that is called innovation. And for that, you need to have deep empathy and compassion. Deep empathy and compassion. So he says, don't give me credit for turning around Microsoft yet. I haven't done anything. The day, he says, people say, I don't work for Microsoft, Microsoft works for me, that is the day our turnaround will be complete, he says. Why? He says, I want people to say, I have a vision, a purpose for which to make the world a better place, and I come to Microsoft and use Microsoft as a platform to deliver that passion and that purpose to the world. He says, the day people say, I don't work for Microsoft, Microsoft works for me, that day you can give me credit for turning around Microsoft. Not quite yet. Yeah? So that's basically it, the 5 keys of positive autocracy. This is the model that we are recommending for leadership in the 21st century. Again, you'll get a lot more detail in the book, so I'll move on so we stay within time. How do we now create a culture of brisk innovation? Yeah? To do that, let me tell you a quick story. GE Aviation, a few years ago, wanted to make their airplane engines more fuel efficient, right? And the usual way of doing this would be the CEO giving the R&D department $1 billion in a year's time to say, figure this out. Well, they did no such thing. First, they realized that actually we don't even need to change our engine design. If the bracket on which the engine is mounted is 30% lighter, the same engine will fly the same plane with the same amount of fuel much longer. So the design challenge now was, let's create a bracket that does not compromise the integrity and safety of the aircraft and yet is 30% lighter. So instead of R&D going into some secretive part of the building and spending a year researching this, they put out a challenge on social media to 7.5 billion people, or how many of us are on social media, and said anybody can participate. Submit a winning design. Submit your entries. We're running a contest, and the winning design will get prize money of $20,000. That's it, $20,000. Within 3 months, they got a design that was almost 80% lighter. Guess which part of the world did it come from? Any idea? Any guess? India. Not India. We give too much credit to India. I wish it was India, but it isn't. It's not India. It's not China. Not Africa. Indonesia. 2 engineering students from Bandung, Indonesia, who hardly spoke any English, for them 20 grand meant a lot, said, let's do this. My point is this. You want to maximize innovation? Crowdsource. Get used to crowdsourcing both internally and externally. GE is just one of the many companies that I studied that are actually regularly using the crowd now. I know GE is going through some rough times, but their aircraft engines business is still pretty solid. These are just some of the companies that are using the crowd for innovation. Talent and innovation is not scarce. Connectivity now enables us to find it from Cincinnati, Ohio to Bandung, Indonesia. That's what connectivity is doing. So this idea that there is a war for talent and talent is scarce and innovation is scarce, well, the war is won and talent has won it. Connectivity now enables you to find that talent, find that innovation wherever it is. These are the times we live in. But it requires a very confident form of leadership to open up the whole kimono and say, yes, let's crowdsource. That goes back to values and purpose and leadership energy. Yeah? Similarly, when it comes to internal talent identification and succession planning, the usual idea is, let's do a 9-box grid and plot people on performance versus potential, and then the top right-hand corner, high potential, high-performing people, send them to Harvard, send them to training, give them stretch assignments, give them coaching, give them mentoring, blah, 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 blah. Instead, what we're saying is, imagine if the CEO puts out a similar challenge like GE did to the whole world internally, saying any employee that has any idea of improving anything whatsoever, form a team, submit your entry by a certain date, and the best 10 entries will be called to head office for a presentation, and maybe there is a little award for that. Only thing is, you got to do it at your own time, over and above your day job. And by the way, anybody and everybody is allowed to enter. You don't need permission to enter. So nobody will be forced to enter, nobody will be prohibited from entering, and you got to do it on your own time. Now, the people that raise their hands every year and give you project after project after project, aren't they your natural future leaders? Aren't they the ones telling you that I have energy? Why have that whole artificial machinery of succession planning to create that one spreadsheet that you want to present to the board once a year? Let this be organic. Let the cream rise to the top naturally. Because we should not be in the business of motivating people and nudging people to work harder. Those who want to work hard will work hard. Those who don't want to work hard will not work hard, how much ever you may try. And in the open source era, why don't we put it back on the people? So it's a triple bottom line. Proactive and natural leadership development takes place. You solve problems and exploit opportunities at virtually no cost. And the board and senior management develops a better line of sight as to who the real talent is. All right. With that, the last part, and we're doing OK on time. How do we create a culture of ownership and high performance? And how do we measure employee engagement? And how do we address the gaps? So how do we create a culture of ownership and high performance? Like I said earlier, we want people to think and act like owners, but we keep putting them into rules and policies and procedures, boxes within boxes within boxes, and they cannot breathe, and we expect them to act like owners. How can we do that? The reason why we don't manage to do this is because all of management practice, for the most part, is based on two flawed assumptions. The first flawed assumption is all employees must be given stretch goals, stretch KPIs, so that they go above and beyond. Even only if everybody goes above and beyond will our stock price climb, right? And second false assumption, managers must closely supervise and keenly motivate these people so that these stretch goals are achieved. Sounds like common sense, right? Of course, people should be allowed to, encouraged to go above and beyond, and it is the job of managers to motivate and supervise, right? Well, let's take this one by one. This idea that everybody must be given stretch goals. In any organization, this is how performance distributes itself. No, this is not a monster created by your human resources department. This is a law of nature. It comes from 1906 when Wilfredo Pareto gave us the original idea of the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle, which says that 80% of all effects are because of 20% of the causes. And the 20-60-20 is nothing but the Pareto principle applied to corporate performance, individual performance within corporations, right? So this is not a monster created by HR. This is actually a universal law of nature. How many people are actually going to achieve those stretch goals? What percentage? It's in front of you, 20%. Then what is the point of asking year after year everybody to write stretch goals? You want to be disappointed 80% of the times every year? Not only do we ignore the genius of Pareto, we also ignore the genius of Albert Einstein, who told us that to keep doing the same thing again and again, hoping for a different result, is a definition of insanity. So both Pareto and Einstein are ignored year after year after year because management practice says that we must encourage everybody to give stretch goals, right? And now about motivating and managing people and supervising people closely. I mean, nobody can motivate and manage anybody because everybody comes pre-motivated. The best we can do as managers is to find their actual leadership energy and link it to the work at hand if possible. That's the best you can do. You cannot motivate anybody, right? But no, we keep doing that, and we say we need to have our managers become better leaders, and they must lead, and how should they lead? How have you motivated your people? All right, so what if we said, instead of stretch goals and instead of you do this and you do that and us telling them, what if we told people you can be anywhere on this curve you want to be? You want to do maximum work? Great. You want to do average work? Great. You want to do minimum work? Great. Imagine this conversation between boss and employee. Hey boss, I've worked incredibly hard for the last 5 years, as you know, and I thank you for the bonuses and the great promotions that you've given me. I've clearly been in the top 20%. Thank you for acknowledging my great work and my energy. But you know, as you know, I've just become a parent, and I'd like to take my foot off the pedal for a little while. And I'd like to get into the middle 60 right now. I am fine that for the next year or two, you will not give me high bonuses. My compensation, my rewards will be average. I'm okay with that until I can sort things out at home and step up again. Is that okay, boss? Now, is that an honest conversation? But does it ever happen? No, because we stigmatize people on the other side of the curve. You see, the people in the middle 60 and the bottom 20 are not bad people. Their needs are different. That's all. Or imagine this conversation. Let's take it further to the left. Boss, I want to be honest with you. I like this company, but this job is not my passion. To be honest, I'm only doing this job to pay the bills, because my real passion is theater. But theater doesn't always pay the bills, so I need this job to pay the bills. But I want to do minimum possible work. Can we agree that you give me minimum possible work for minimum possible pay? I am not ambitious about getting high bonuses and things like that. Give me minimum pay. And by the way, I'm willing to take the risk that if you think I fall below the minimum, you will fire me with no questions asked. Is that okay, boss? Another honest conversation that never takes place. The point is, whether you give everybody stretch goals, whether you try to motivate everybody or don't motivate everybody, your performance distribution is going to take this bell shape anyway. Why not legitimize it and pay people and reward people accordingly? Because you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink anyway, right? So again, not saying that the middle 60 and the bottom 20 are bad people. Without them, the top 20 cannot produce 80% of the results. They need them, but their needs are different. So align your compensation policy and your budgets accordingly, and let everybody be happy. Actual performance, if you set people free, will go up, not down. Why? Because anyway, the top 20% will produce 80% of the results. The remaining 60 and 20, now that you've removed the stigma of non-performance and replaced it with trust and freedom, whatever they do with more happiness and less stress, so overall productivity goes up, not down. Many, many examples of companies who have implemented this. Many, many. In the book, you'll find lots and lots of examples. So the idea is to maximize ownership and performance, set them free. Final point today. How do you measure employee engagement and address the gaps? So raise your hand, please, if your company does an annual or biannual employee engagement survey. So quite a few, yeah? So let me guess. It goes something like this. Someone creates a form of about 100 items or more, and it is put on an anonymous server, and then you get emails from HR saying, please fill out, please fill out, please fill out. And they try to drive as much participation. And then finally, you give your reviews, and all the data is averaged. The scores on every item and every category are averaged, and a report is prepared, and HR sits down with senior management and says, our score this year is 69%. That's not acceptable. Let's try to make it 75% next year, and let's come up with some initiatives, some strategies to address employee engagement for the following year. Sounds familiar? Yes? Yeah? Now, who are the most important people in this equation who produce 80% of your results? The top 20. What happens to the voice of your top 20 producers if you average the scores across this curve? It's lost, right? And then when you act on this average data, are you promoting mediocrity or are you promoting excellence? My case rests. Again, don't hear me say that the remaining 80% are bad people or useless people or should be treated badly. No, not at all. I'm saying treat them respectfully, but play favorites. Because these people, you've given them the freedom, you've given them the respect, you've given them the trust to work as much or as little or when not, entirely up to them, right? Your performance contract with them should be honest. You decide, I'm not going to. Right? And overall productivity is going to go up. So the point here is replace the employee engagement survey instead with a values-based 360. We say don't do employee engagement surveys because they don't produce valuable data. Instead, do a values-based 360. You want to get all your employees evaluated based on a 360 feedback system on whether they are living the values or not to measure the strength of your culture, because it is the living of the values that is going to make your company successful in the long run in the open source era, like I said. You don't want people behaving badly because everybody is naked. But if you must do surveys, employee engagement surveys, well, then the answer is simple. Ask the top 20 separately, ask the middle 60 separately, ask the bottom 20 separately. Since you have opened it up, anyway, and there is no issues with transparency because people are choosing it, right? And we live in the age of big data. We have the data. We can ask people in a segmented way and then respond in a segmented way. Yeah? But our first preference is not to do an employee engagement survey at all, but to do, again, you'll read lots and lots about it in the book if you care to. So that's a little bit about managing people in the open source era. So basically, that's what I have. Let me summarize. We're saying that when it comes to leadership, the days of look-back competency models, where, how did leaders in the previous 20 years in our company become successful? Let's teach those skills to the next generation. Those days are over. Reading and discussing best practice case study after case study after case study in those advanced management programs at very prestigious organizations. We are in the age of next practice creation, not best practice replication. Instead, let's uncover leadership energy. If there's one gift you can give to your subordinates or the people that you work with, is to help them understand what are their values and what is their values-based purpose. If it wasn't for some of my mentors, I wouldn't find mine. And then practice the 5 keys of positive autocracy that we talked about at some length earlier. from innovation processes. You know, I chuckle every time I pick up a book on innovation. It says, here's the eight-stage process of innovation. If innovation was a step-by-step formula, wouldn't all of us be great innovators, right? And this idea of management, identifying and managing hypos through psychometric testing and personality testing and what have you. Instead, how about crowdsourcing innovation and crowdsourcing potential and talent even internally? Let the cream rise to the top naturally. And finally, instead of stretch goals and managing closely, set them free. Instead of employee engagement surveys, let's measure the strength of our culture. So that, in essence, is open source leadership in today's day and age. I want to thank you very much. And would love it if you would stay in touch. All of this detail is in the book, so I'll leave you back with the summary slides. So if you have any questions, we can do. Thank you very much.